Alright guys, today's video, we're going to make some bold claims. We upgraded our wardrobe to look more authoritative so that we can pretend like we know what we're talking about. I'm going to say some things in today's video that a lot of people may disagree with, wholeheartedly or somewhatly, and that's okay. Your Ark of War experience on your server is going to be different than my Ark of War experience on my server, and the opponents I play against, and the realm of people that I interact with. So if you have a different opinion based on the scenario you're playing, put it in the comments below. Talk to us, interact with me. Tell me something I don't know. I'm happy to hear it, or I'm happy to debate you. So today's video, we are going to talk about the top 8 commanders. And there are some honorable mentions. I will throw the honorable mentions in there, and I'm sticking to 8 to try to simplify things. So I limited it to 2 infantry, 2 airship, 2 walkers. And then I added 2 more commanders because they add something special to the game, and it really helps players that don't want to spend, right? Beating tier suppression. Nobody wants to go against the boss on their server when they have tier 7 against your little tier 4 army. Or if you're in the later games of the stages, or later stages of the game, where the boss on your server has 100,000 leadership and tier 10 or tier 11, because you just can't win. And your whole army will get one shot. So it's like you can't even play against those players. But if you want to, you could play with Bullet or Rock and actually compete at that level. So here's my top 8 video, and let's start with the king. We're going to start with Rogers. The reason Rogers is the world boss is because not only is he an expensive hero to acquire. How does that already activate? There he is. Okay. But also, he runs airships. Airship Awakening is the best, especially against smaller armies, and for so many other reasons. Let's say the first thing that makes him better than any other commander in the game is defensive stance. This ability, after the 3rd trigger of it, so after slots 1, 2, and 3, trigger it, with 80% chance, there's a good chance they're going to trigger it. By the 4th time that gets triggered, all of his troops take 0 damage. This skill does not get affected like a defense stat. It is just straight up damage reduced by a percentage. So if it has 4 stacks on it, by the time the 5th and 6th slots go, they're already immune and they're in the back row, but they're just over-triggering it on 1, 2, and 3. So by the time your 2nd turn comes around, all of Rogers' troops that survived are going to be invulnerable. Now, of course, if your first slot dies from your opponent, then your Rogers defensive stacks don't continue to trigger, because every time your turn happens, the stacks that you had triggered on the previous stance by that stack deletes itself. So you need to at least hit it 4 or 5 times, depending on your skill level, to keep him immune. But basically, if he survives versus Stella and Golem in a full fight, he will always win. Even though his damage is all of his gear is done in defensive gear, he has Tyrant Cometh, this other skill, a 20% chance to trigger. It's a guaranteed hit. Attack increases by 184% at level 46, so it hits really hard. It just, you have to go all the way around. Your whole army gets to attack, their whole army gets to attack, and then it triggers before the next round starts. So it's not as good as like Golem's Crush ability that hits right there on the spot. And if you're trying to use Golem as a 1-slot bus commander, if you're trying to use Rogers as a 1-slot bus commander, he's not so great at it. But we'll get into that in a Rogers video later. But anyway, Rogers is the king of the game. And the only answer to Rogers right now is Lilith and Robin. And even them, with the exact same gear levels and troops and research, are even at that just a fair fight. And infantry should have an advantage over airship. Even with the strength and weakened gear, Rogers is still that powerful. So yeah, so that's Rogers. Second to him is Golem. The boss of the game, Vera, he's like the one who spent the most on this game. He has 230 million power, an 850k Golem. He uses Golem instead of Rogers. He probably has a Rogers backup just in case someone gets close to him. But because he has so much more leadership than anyone else, that in a fair fight with his army and his leadership, he just one-shots most people. And they can't take his Golem out. So there's no point for him getting Rogers yet, because no one could beat his Golem anyway. And Golem is more the glass cannon offensive style, where Rogers is more of the turtle defensive style. So that's why Golem is the previous king of the game, only replaced by Rogers in a fair fight. But to take out a Rogers and to have minimal losses, you could just one slot bust with Golem and trade better. And that's not just Golem, right? So Stella, the X, and anyone in a one slot bust formation can usually score points on Rogers. But in a fair fight, Rogers always wins the long run. So, okay. Now, as far as infantry is concerned, Stella's queen, right? She beats X because her Wings of Eternity skill gets 1.5% damage, and it triggers 60% of the time, where the X's ability is only a 40% chance to trigger, and it does 1% of the skill level. So Stella's procs more often and hits for more damage. And then the X's Bloodlust skill is better. She gets a second strike, but it's kind of like a Raymond skill versus Golem. You know, it's a win more skill. If you're already winning with Raymond, yeah, you get an extra strike. You might kill him a little quicker, but it doesn't kind of take you to the next edge in a fair fight. It's just kind of a win more skill, and that's the same with the X. Great for PvE, but not so much PvP, and that's why Stella takes her slot. So the third commander on the list, and not necessarily that order, is Plasma, because he's just always a useful and relevant commander. His Quantum Blast will always trade for more points in a fight, right? So if someone has 1, 2, 3 troops in a formation, not necessarily troops in 4, 5, and 6, because they know you have a Plasma, and Plasma's ability hits all slots, he'll always trade better against 1 to 3 slots than any other commander in the game, because he's guaranteed to do some form of damage, as long as you're not getting beat by tier suppression. That skill doesn't work with tier suppression. So Plasma's just a useful character in the game. If he comes around, make sure you get him. Everyone at the high level has at least a 2 or 5k Plasma, because you can just stick some high tier troops on him, send him in your opponent's army, and you will always trade for more than you give away. So he's in the conversation. And then we get to the Walker commanders. So Hoodoo, if you're the boss of your server and you don't want to take any risks and you just want to put all your troops in slot 1 on Hoodoo and just go around attacking people, if you have enough damage and crit, he'll one-shot that slot and just blow everything up. Hoodoo is easy to counter if you just put Rangers in the front row and all your heavy troops in the back row, but that's even not a guarantee. It is some way to counter him, but even then, he's still a monster to deal with. And then when it comes to so Hoodoo being the pure glass cannon, offensive style, berserk style, boss style Walker commander, then you have like kind of the more reserved approach, right? You have your chiefs who have the guaranteed hit skill, right? More damage skill, kind of looks like a golem there, but is played a little differently. I didn't talk about Hoodoo, but that what makes him so good is his death rattle. He kills a slot of troops, and whatever that slot was, whatever their HP was, that blows up on all the other slots. And you get some amazing replays out of that. There's a highlight video I just released a couple days ago if you want to check that out. The $1 million death rattle that Seraphim pulled off. Gan pulled it off. So sick. Watch that replay. I'll put it at the end of this video. So anyway, I put Moonshadow and Hoodoo at the top of that list. I don't put Chief there. And the reason I don't put Chief, even though he does hit slightly harder than Moonshadow in most situations, he can't beat tier suppression. And in the end of the game on my server, a lot of people are hitting each other's arcs by paying the thousands of gold to teleport next to each other, turning marching speed on, turning your marching hull on, taking your big commander and just sending all tier 1, right? All rangers. Because if they do have a tier suppression march or a bunch of black holes and no resources, sometimes it's a trap. So if you just risk tier 1, you may lose 100,000 or 200,000 tier 1, but it's not the end of the world. You didn't lose your full tier 10 army that takes, weeks to rebuild. So Chief doesn't beat tier suppression. Galileo doesn't beat tier suppression. Hoodoo doesn't beat tier suppression. But Rock and Moonshadow do. And Rock's 40% tier suppression beating skill is better than Moonshadow's 20% tier suppression beating skill. But Rock as a primary commander is not very good. He's just like Bullet, but Bullet doesn't give away points in galactic battles with Rangers. And since my server and my guild is more oriented in competing at kill events and galactic battles, I am more oriented towards Bullet. But if I was a Walker commander, I would consider using Rock, but maybe not necessarily as a main. Anyway, okay, so where are we looking at Flare? Let's go down to who were we looking at? Was it Moonshadow's butt? All right, so Moonshadow. So yeah, her silent skill beats tier suppression. Only 20% of the time, but if you have a 6-slot run against somebody, assuming it's not an airship commander with a big awakening, you should be able to do some serious punishment, at least land it once. at least have a chance of breaking through and still hitting their arc and not losing everything with nothing to gain. And silence works as a double shot ability. It attacks first, and then your normal attack, and then if you trigger Gemini or something, that goes after. So I like her for that. Now, in the conversation, we're still looking at Exorcist, but I think we're getting to the end with her. I think she is kind of like a walker version of Darurai, with instead of getting an Aether Shield, he gets this defense bonus. But it's not like Rogers' defense bonus, it's just the defense stat, which is okay, but not really an S-class in the conversation commander, more of an A-class kind of decent commander. Okay, and we're trying to show you one more Walker commander. Who was it? Why? Oh, Pictor. So Pictor. I mean, he's cool, man. He's got a 20% guaranteed hit skill like Mia does, but his 40% skill is like Hoodoo's 20% skill. He hits all. If his primary attack hits, then everything in that row hits, which is great if you're one slot busting with him, because not only does he have the Walker Awakening that hits the whole row, he also has the sticky bombs, and his sticky bombs hit harder than Hoodoo's Chain Blast. So he's really good, just loading up one slot, sending it down the way, and who knows, if you don't know what you're going into, at least you're only risking one slot of troops, and if it does hit, boy, you're going to do some serious damage to anyone that has a full march there. So still a little vulnerable to plasma, but if you're running him as a one slot bus formation, it's not so bad. So Pictor's in the conversation. So, and then of course I kind of mentioned Galileo. I love Galileo. He's super fun, especially when you're fighting a big monster and you lose some tier 7, and then boom, you trigger that plunder, and all of a sudden you heal like 30 or 50 tier 7. It just feels so good. But in reality, in a PvP fight, a lot of it, especially with Galileo, he's going against guys like Rogers and Golem. And Golem is going to one-shot Galileo slots, even in a fair fight. Just Golem's a glass cannon, right? So you're not going to get that healing chance on him. Against Rogers, you get the healing chance, but by the time Rogers' 5th slot attacks, before he's even done any significant damage to you, he's already going immune. And if Plunder doesn't do damage, you don't heal. So that's why Galileo went from being like one of the best Walker commanders in the game, without a doubt, to kind of like, oh, he's in the back row, he's not terrible, but it'll eventually eat him into either Hoodoo or Pictor or Moonshadow or Chief. So that's where that is. All right, and that covers the majority of the top 8. I think there's room for other commanders to explore and kind of put their name out there. Vega is interesting in the sense that his breakdown ability disregards defense buffs. So at level 60, he disregards 100% of defense buffs. You can kind of just look at skills like that. If it says reduces something by a certain percent, just consider that whatever the base damage is, it goes up that percentage. So at level 30, this will do 60% debuff. So if he normally hits for 100,000 on a troop type, just assume when that hits, it's going to hit for like 140 to 160,000. That's kind of how you treat these abilities, because the math is a little wonky, but if you want something to just kind of estimate off of, that's a good place to start. So Vega's in the conversation. He has a heal ability. I've never seen it really pay off, so I don't get too excited about it. And Black's in the conversation. He's like the perfect balance between Golem and Rogers. He doesn't have the invulnerability of Rogers, and he doesn't have the crush strength of Golem, but his best offense skill says you can stack him full of like barriers and defense and HP items, make him a super tank, and when he triggers this, he turns all that defense into offense, into attack offense. So he hits really hard when that triggers. So Black is a great little versatile commander in that regard. Definitely good for PvP, not necessarily good for like Endless and Ace. And he will lose to Golems, and he will lose to Rogers in a straight fair fight, I would think. I don't know that for sure. We haven't really seen him go all the way. But anyway, there's more commanders to explore here, but those are the main ones that, are worth putting on the table there. Those are my top 8. If you disagree, tell me why. I'm glad to hear it. I'll probably agree with you on some things. And if your server's different and because of a certain setup or the way you fight, see, some of us only fight the top 5 players in our server who always have high tier, which is always a risky battle. And other players never even meddle with them, and none of the high players even bother them. So you might always be going against people with tier 2 fights or small armies, and you may have a completely different look on the play style of your server. But thanks for watching the video. If you have questions, put them in the comments below. Subscribe to the channel. Join our little community. And I look forward to the next patch and the new updates to see what they give us. These devs are always dropping new stuff on us. The meta's always changing. So until the next video, thanks for watching, and yeah, we'll see you next time.